I watched them laugh at her stained jacket, mock her questions, treat her like she was invisible. They had no idea they were insulting the woman who'd just bought their entire company. By the time they realized who she was, their careers were already over. If you've ever been underestimated, judged by your appearance, or dismissed because of who people thought you were, you need to hear this story. Stay until the end, because what happens in that final meeting will leave you speechless. Hit that like button if you're ready for some serious karma. Her name was Rebecca Stone, and at 52 years old, she'd built something most people only dream about. Cascade Manufacturing wasn't some flashy enterprise you'd see on magazine covers. It was real, solid, a supply chain and industrial distribution company that kept factories running across the country. Rebecca had started with nothing, worked her way up from inventory clerk to CEO, and along the way, she'd learned one critical lesson. You can't run a company from a corner office. You have to see it from the ground. That's why, on a Tuesday morning in September, she was driving herself 4 hours to visit a facility her company had just acquired. No assistant, no security detail, no advance notice. Just Rebecca, a thermos of coffee, and a jacket that now had a lovely brown stain across the front because apparently potholes and hot beverages don't mix well. The acquisition wasn't public yet. She'd specifically requested that the announcement be delayed by a week. She wanted to see the place as it really was, not the polished version they'd show for the new owner. She wanted to meet the people, watch how things actually worked, understand what she'd really bought. It was something she always did, and it had never steered her wrong. When she pulled into the parking lot of the distribution facility, it looked exactly like the reports described. A massive warehouse, loading docks busy with workers, trucks coming and going. She grabbed her notebook, locked her car, and headed for the entrance. She wasn't dressed for a boardroom, just comfortable pants, a simple blouse, and that unfortunate jacket. Her hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail. She looked like what she was, a woman who'd just driven 4 hours and was ready to work. The moment she stepped onto the warehouse floor, she knew something was off. The energy felt wrong. Workers moved with their heads down, rushed and tense. Nobody was talking to each other. It had that heavy silence of a place where people are afraid to make mistakes. She approached the first person she saw, a man in his 40s wearing a supervisor vest with the name Derek embroidered on it. He was barking orders at a younger employee, something about pallet placement being all wrong. When he finally noticed Rebecca standing there, his expression shifted to irritation. "Can I help you?" he asked, not really like he wanted to help at all. "I'm just trying to understand the workflow here," Rebecca said with a genuine smile. "How do you prioritize which orders get loaded first?" Derek looked at her like she'd just asked him to explain rocket science to a toddler. "Sweetheart, this is a working warehouse. We don't really do tours. If you're looking for the administrative offices, they're around front. They handle the hiring." Before Rebecca could respond, a woman walked up beside Derek. Brittany, according to her name tag. She looked Rebecca up and down with barely concealed amusement, her eyes stopping on the coffee stain. "Rough morning?" Brittany said with a smirk. "The front office jobs are mostly filled, but I think maintenance might be hiring. You'd probably want to, clean up a bit first, though." They both laughed. Not cruel laughter exactly, but dismissive. The kind that says, "You don't belong here, and we're being generous by even acknowledging you." Rebecca felt that old familiar feeling, the one she'd felt countless times climbing her way up. That moment when people look at you and decide you're not worth their respect. She'd learned long ago not to react with anger. Instead, she smiled politely and said, "I appreciate the directions. I'll find my way." As she walked toward the main office building, she heard Brittany whisper something to Derek, followed by more laughter. Rebecca didn't turn around. She just made a mental note and kept walking. The lobby was nicer than the warehouse. Clean floors, decent furniture, the smell of fresh coffee from somewhere. The receptionist, an older woman with kind eyes and graying hair, looked up with a warm smile. "Good morning. How can I help you?" Finally, Rebecca thought, a human being. "I'm here to observe operations today," she said carefully. "Would it be all right if I waited here for a bit?" The receptionist, Grace, her nameplate read, nodded immediately. Of course. Can I get you some coffee? You look like you've been traveling. That obvious? Rebecca laughed, glancing down at her jacket. Honey, I've done that drive. Highway 40 has more potholes than pavement. Grace poured her a cup of coffee without waiting for an answer. Cream and sugar are right there. Make yourself comfortable. It was such a simple kindness, but it stood in stark contrast to everything else Rebecca had experienced so far. She thanked Grace and settled into one of the waiting area chairs, positioning herself where she could see through the glass walls into the offices beyond. That's when she saw them again. Derek, Brittany, and another man, older, with the confident swagger of someone who'd been in charge too long. They were in a break room, visible through the interior windows, and they were loud enough that their voices carried. Did you hear the rumor? The older man was saying. Apparently, we got bought out by some manufacturing outfit called Cascade. Derek snorted. Yeah, well, good luck to whoever they send to run things. This place runs the way it runs because we make it work. Some corporate type isn't going to change 15 years of operations. That's right, Paul, Brittany chimed in. We've got the real knowledge here. They need us more than we need them. Paul, apparently the operations director, leaned back in his chair. I've already got my speech ready. First meeting with the new boss, I'm going to make it very clear that this facility has its own culture, its own way of doing things. They can either respect that or watch everything fall apart. Rebecca sipped her coffee slowly, her expression neutral, but inside, alarm bells were ringing. This wasn't confidence, this was arrogance, the kind that gets people hurt, gets companies sued, gets good workers driven away. She spent the rest of that day watching, really watching. She saw Derek berate a young worker named Carlos for asking about proper lifting techniques, called him soft, told him to toughen up or find another job. She watched Paul take credit for a shipping solution that Carlos had actually suggested. She observed Brittany extending her lunch break by 40 minutes while other employees covered her work. But what truly disturbed her was what she overheard late in the afternoon. She was still in that waiting area. Grace had brought her lunch, bless her, and seemed happy to have someone to chat with during the slow periods. The management team gathered in the conference room nearby, and they hadn't quite closed the door all the way. The safety inspection report from last month, Paul was saying, his voice low but clear. We need to make that disappear before any new ownership people start asking questions. The one about the dock equipment? Derek asked. Yeah, 3 citations. If we bury it in the maintenance files, no one will find it unless they know exactly what they're looking for. Brittany's voice joined in. What about the incident logs? Should we revise those numbers? Already done, Paul said. Look, whoever takes over here is going to get our best face. Our numbers are going to look fantastic, and if they don't appreciate what we do, if they try to change too much, well, I've already been contacted by Riverside Distribution. They'd love to have someone with my experience, and I'd be happy to bring along information about Cascade's client list and pricing strategies. Rebecca's hand tightened on her coffee cup. This wasn't just bad management. This was sabotage waiting to happen. This was the kind of behavior that destroyed companies from the inside. She left quietly that evening, thanking Grace for her hospitality. Grace walked her to the door, and in that brief moment of privacy, she said something that confirmed everything Rebecca had observed. I've worked here 30 years, Grace said softly. It didn't used to be like this. We used to have managers who cared about people, not just looking good on paper. Good folks have been leaving. The ones who stay either keep their heads down or become like them. She paused. I don't know who's taking over, but I hope they actually look at what's happening here. Not just the reports. Rebecca squeezed her hand. Thank you for being kind today. It meant more than you know. The drive home took forever. Rebecca's mind was spinning with everything she'd seen, everyone she'd met. By the time she reached her office late that night, she knew exactly what needed to happen. The next week moved in a blur of meetings, documentation, and very quiet conversations with her legal team and HR director. The official announcement was scheduled for the following Monday, a company-wide meeting at the facility, mandatory attendance for all employees. Grace was there too, sitting toward the back, her hands folded in her lap. Carlos stood with a group of younger workers, looking nervous. The interim facility manager, someone Rebecca had installed quietly over the weekend, stepped to the microphone. Thank you all for gathering. As you know, this facility is now part of Cascade Manufacturing. Our CEO wanted to personally introduce herself and share her vision for our future here. Please welcome Rebecca Stone. The screen flickered on, and there she was. Not in a stained jacket this time, but in a crisp business suit, standing in front of the Cascade Manufacturing logo. Professional, powerful, unmistakable. The color drained from Derek's face so fast Rebecca could see it even through the video feed. Paul's confident posture collapsed. Brittany's mouth actually fell open. Rebecca let the silence hang for a moment, watching recognition and horror dawn across their faces. Then she began to speak. Good morning. Some of you don't know me. Some of you met me last week and didn't realize it. She let that land. I believe that you can't truly understand a company from a corner office or a spreadsheet. You have to see it from the ground up. So last Tuesday, I drove here myself. I walked your warehouse floor. I sat in your lobby. I watched how you work, how you treat each other, how you operate when you think no one important is watching. She paused, her voice calm but firm. What I saw troubled me deeply. I saw talented workers being dismissed and belittled. I saw safety concerns being ignored. I witnessed managers falsifying records and planning to hide violations from oversight. I heard people plot to steal proprietary information if they didn't get their way. The room was so quiet you could hear people breathing. But I also saw something else. I saw workers who care about doing things right, even when it's harder. I met people who've given decades to this company and still show up with kindness and integrity. I saw the potential of what this place could be if we remove the toxins and nurture the talent. Rebecca's expression hardened slightly. Effective immediately, this facility will undergo a complete safety audit. Every citation, every violation, every hidden report will be examined. We're implementing an anonymous feedback system so every voice can be heard without fear of retaliation. We're instituting mandatory management training focused on leadership, respect, and accountability. She looked directly at the camera, as if she could see into that room. Grace Thompson, who has served this company with distinction for 30 years, is being promoted to Human Resources Director. She'll be rebuilding our culture from the ground up. Carlos Rivera, who asked important questions about safety protocols and was mocked for it, is being promoted to Safety Compliance Officer. He'll report directly to me. Rebecca could see Grace's hand fly to her mouth, tears in her eyes. Carlos looked stunned, like he couldn't quite believe what he was hearing. As for Derek Hutchins, Paul Morrison, and Brittany Chen, you are suspended effective immediately, pending formal investigation into ethics violations, safety regulation breaches, and planned corporate espionage. Security will escort you from the premises. Your behavior doesn't just violate company policy, it violates the basic respect every human being deserves. The camera angle widened slightly as security personnel moved through the crowd. The three of them stood frozen for a moment, then Derek started to protest, his voice rising. You can't do this, we run this place, without us. Paul cut him off, his face red. This is exactly what I warned about. Corporate interference destroying what works. But Rebecca's voice came through the speakers, calm and unwavering. What works? Hiding safety violations, stealing company secrets, creating an environment so toxic that your best people are fleeing? That's not what works. That's what fails. You just failed to see it until now. They were escorted out in silence, and as the doors closed behind them, Rebecca continued, To everyone else in this room, this is a new beginning. I don't expect perfection. I expect honesty, effort, and respect. If you give those things, you'll find I'm the best boss you've ever had. If you can't, then this isn't the place for you. But I promise you this. I see you. I value you. And together, we're going to build something better. The meeting ended, but Rebecca stayed on calls with the facility for hours, answering questions, listening to concerns, meeting with teams. The transformation didn't happen overnight, but it happened. 3 months later, the numbers told the story. Production was up 34%. Safety incidents had dropped to 0. The employee satisfaction survey, the first honest one they'd ever conducted, showed dramatic improvement. Workers who'd left were asking to come back. The facility had gone from one of Cascade's most troubled acquisitions to one of its strongest performers. As for Derek, Paul, and Brittany, the investigation found everything Rebecca had suspected and more. Derek was terminated and ended up taking an entry-level position at a competitor, his reputation in the industry damaged beyond repair. Paul faced legal consequences for the safety violations. The hidden citations had resulted in 2 worker injuries that were never properly reported. Brittany was fired when they found evidence she'd already begun copying client information to personal drives. Grace thrived in her new role, creating mentorship programs and support systems that changed the entire culture. Carlos became a rising star in the company, eventually leading safety initiatives across all Cascade facilities nationwide. Rebecca still does those unannounced visits. She could walk in with her title blazing, security in tow, everyone falling over themselves to impress her, but then she'd never see the truth. She'd never find the Graces and the Carloses of the world, the people who deserve to be lifted up. She'd never identify the problems that hide behind polished presentations. Because here's what she learned, growing up working in her father's warehouse, climbing from the bottom to the top. Your title doesn't make you a leader, your character does, and character shows most clearly in how you treat people when you think there's nothing to gain from it. Derek, Paul, and Brittany thought they were untouchable. They thought their positions protected them, that their knowledge made them indispensable. They never imagined that the woman they dismissed, the one they mocked and directed to human resources like she was beneath their notice, held their entire future in her hands. They didn't recognize the woman CEO until it was too late to pretend. And by then, there was nothing left to pretend about. Rebecca could have announced herself that first day. She could have walked in with security and her title on display. But then she never would have seen the truth. She never would have known who Grace was, or Carlos, or how deep the problems ran. Sometimes the greatest power isn't in making people fear your title. It's in seeing exactly who they are when they think no one important is watching. If this story hit home, smash that like button and subscribe for more stories about karma, justice, and people getting exactly what they deserve. Drop a comment telling me, have you ever been underestimated? What happened when people realized they were wrong about you? And if you want more stories like this, check out the next video. Remember, treat everyone with respect. You never know who you're really talking to.